Guten Abend, meine Freunde. Ich begrüße Sie zur Hanovi Global Network, wo Wahrheit und Rechenschaftlich an oberster Stelle stehen. Schlimme Dinge geschehen, wenn Standardarbeitsanweisungen nicht gefolgt würden. Good evening, my friends. Welcome to Hanovi Global Network, where truth and accountability reign supreme. Bad things happen when standard operating procedures are not followed. Okay? Schlimme Dinge geschehen, wenn Standardarbeitsanweisungen nicht gefolgt würden. Bad things happen when standard operating procedures are not followed. And that is exactly what I believe happened in the cases of Mr. Franklin and Mr. Frederick. But first, I want us to take a look at a case that I think is extremely pertinent to the issues that came up with Mr. Franklin and Mr. Frederick's passing. Okay? So we need to go back a little, and we need to take a look at an appellate case, okay, in the Eastern Caribbean Supreme Court Appellate Division. And I will explain this case to you a bit, so bear with me. You will see where I'm going with this. Now, I am sure that all of you may be familiar with the Oscar Bartholomew case. Okay? Apparently, he was a gentleman that sort of was confused a bit when he saw someone and he went over to embrace them. And then this thing turned into a whole big scandal. He was arrested, and it was alleged that he was belligerent with the arresting officers, and subsequently the gentleman ended up losing his life. Now, after that occurred, the police commissioner and the DPP charged the police officers, okay, involved in that particular situation with manslaughter. The constables involved were Mr. Roger Felix, Mr. Sean Garnis, Mr. Wendell Sylvester, Mr. Kenton Hazard, and Mr. Edward Gibson. So after the Commissioner of Police and the DPP, Mr. Christopher Nelson, who was the DPP at the time, charged the gentleman with manslaughter, the gentleman's counsel challenged the indictment and went about seeking to pause any criminal proceedings against them. So the case went forth in front of the judge of the Eastern District. And the gentleman's lawyers or counsel argued that, look, the gentleman cannot be charged by the police commissioner and the DPP until an inquest is completed by the coroner of the district. The judge in question agreed with the gentleman's counsel and said that the coroner's inquest had to be completed before any charges can be laid on these police officers. However, that was not the end of it. The Commissioner of Police and the DPP decided to appeal the decision and took it before the Supreme Court of the Eastern Caribbean Appellate Division. So I want you to take a look at this document, and you will see the parties involved in that particular case. You can always pause the video to take a look at it. Eventually, the Appeals Division decided to side in favor of the Commissioner of Police and the DPP. And they cited many reasons why they decided to do so. First and foremost, they said that the Coroner's Act and the actions that result from it is one of two ways of initiating criminal proceedings, but also agreed that it doesn't take away anything from the Commissioner of Police and the DPP also okay, alternatively initiating criminal proceedings for manslaughter or murder. They also said because the Coroner's Act existed in law before the Constitution of Grenada, that the Coroner's Act, because it is existing law, must in some respects accommodate the Constitution. Now, the Constitution is clear about the powers of the DPP in Section 71 and the powers of the police in Section 78. The appellate judges also expressed concern that what if someone is suspected of murder or manslaughter, okay, and is a possible flight risk or obviously a risk to the community, and the commissioner and the DPP has to wait until an inquest is finished or completed to lay charges, then you must understand there could be several things that could have happened in that period of time, especially if you're dealing with a case of manslaughter or murder. The said individual suspected of the act can continue to be a harm to the community, or if they are a flight risk, can leave the state. So that is one of the reasons why the judges cited the importance, okay, of having the police commissioner and the DPP the leverage to act without having to wait on a coroner's inquest. And that makes a lot of sense. It's very practical. Apparently, the UK resolved that problem in 1926 when they said that if the police commissioner or the DPP or the equivalent charges an individual with manslaughter, then the coroner's inquest ceases. Now take a look at this particular piece, and again you can pause the video to look at part of the decision. Now I want to inform the Grenadian public a little bit and have them understand the sort of leverage that the DPP has, as is clear in Section 71 of the Constitution of Grenada. Now, the DPP has a lot of power, and with a lot of power should come a lot of responsibility. So it's quite important when you're in such a position that you be extremely considerate, careful, slow to act, and decisive. It is important that with such a powerful position that you follow, first and foremost, standard operating procedure, so that we do not end up in situations like we currently have, where there might be a perception of improprieties or a perception of mishandling of particular cases. Now, I believe that especially that this appeals case went to the Supreme Court of the Eastern Division, that this case should have been, and the results thereof should have been, in the collective psychology, okay, of the DPP's office, okay, and should have guided decisions when it came to Mr. Franklyn and Mr. Frederick's cases, because there is precedence, okay? And the precedence I'm talking about, as required by the Coroner's Act, that if someone's death occurs while, okay, in the possession of the state, then obviously coroner's inquest is required. And as we have said over and over, if there is sudden, suspicious, accidental, or unknown death, then again, the Coroner's Act takes control. The Coroner's Act is activated. And by all means and measure, these two cases would have fit sudden, suspicious, accidental, or unknown. Either one of them would have qualified for these two cases. So again, if standard operating procedures were followed, then guess what? As soon as there was a discovery of the death, the medical examiner, okay, and the coroner of the districts would have been informed. And again, just to reiterate, the law is clear, okay, that this should be done immediately, okay? There shouldn't be much delay in getting this done. Obviously, that was not done on Mr. Franklyn's, as alleged by Mr. Cadgerton Hood, that may not have been done on Mr. Franklyn's case. And based on what is said in the public space by the family of Mr. Frederick, the same mistake was made on his particular case. So when you wait, okay, after a year, over 6 months, to recommend to the coroners of the district to have an inquest, then that creates a problem, especially with perception of incompetence, okay, or mishandling of the situation. Now, the DPP's position, and I'm sure the constable's position, they have thorough experience in this sort of matters. So I believe it wasn't a case of incompetence, as I have said before. So the question is, again, why these two particular cases were so apparently mishandled, especially again when there should have been some sort of collective precedence with the DPP's office, knowing the history of the Oscar Bartholomew case. In that particular case, it was properly done. The coroner was informed. So why the coroner of the districts were not informed on Mr. Franklyn's case and Mr. Frederick's case? Why the deviation from standard operating procedures? We started off this by saying that bad things happen when standard operating procedures are not followed. Okay? So just maybe all this suspicion, okay, and all this concern by the Grenadian people may not have happened if standard operating procedures were followed from the inception. But now it seems like in some respects, because of public pressure, okay, and because of this concern here in this particular cases about possibility of some sort of foul play, that it would say that the DPP and the commissioner, okay, or the constabulary force feels pressured to act and to order inquest on these two particular cases. Again, I believe that in some way could taint, okay, or pressure, or in some respect corrupt the cases a bit, now that the coroners have to handle it after such a long time, after all this suspicion, and in some respects may at this stage make the coroner's duties and job a little more difficult, especially if they really want to delve into the causes, okay, and the circumstances of the deaths of these two gentlemen. There's possibility that bodies now will have to be exhumed, okay? And this again might be even more traumatic for the families. But I want you to take a look at the serious power that lies in the hands and the office of the DPP. And that is why I believe it is critical that the person holding that position should be extremely responsible, careful, considerate, and well learned in these matters, okay? Because possible mishandling of these cases and with such great responsibility can have dire consequences for the society. Take a look at the serious power of the DPP to continue, to discontinue, and to take over. Pay careful attention to that. Cases from any person or authority. That is also serious power and leverage to act when it comes to criminal proceedings. So there you have it. The powers of the DPP. Serious power, huh? To institute, to continue, to take over, to discontinue, okay, criminal proceedings by any person or authority, okay? The good thing about the Coroner's Act, there's a part which says, and I think that's the check and balance, which is very good, that the DPP can take up the case after a verdict is given by the coroner's court and continue to gather more evidence and proceed with criminal proceedings. But there's also a part that says if the DPP doesn't do that, then the case can still in some respects be used as a foundation for criminal proceedings against the individual so indicted. So again, I think that's the check and balance. And I think it would look kind of weird if the DPP didn't take up some sort of referral from the coroner to continue criminal proceedings. But you must understand, there is a lot of oversight and there's a lot of judgment by people's very position that could have assisted earlier on in this case and prevent it getting to a situation of this sort of perception of some sort of impropriety or this sort of perception of a mishandling of these two cases. Because you have an attorney general, okay? An attorney general is informed about these high profile cases, okay? And again, an attorney general is there to advise the current administration on legal matters. And in some respects, because of the implications and because of the public's perception on these cases, I think it was in some respect imperative that the Attorney General should have coordinated in some respects. Okay? I think this was an exceptional case and should have said or advised or provide some sort of advice, okay, to the DPP, okay, that says, look, this is causing a lot of public uproar, okay? There's a perception that something is not being done properly here. And if the Attorney General had took a look at this properly, okay, she would have discovered that standard operating procedures were not followed and could have advised, okay, the DPP that, look, why this wasn't done earlier on in the case, instead of letting it get to the situation it had gotten. Even the leader of the administration, it's not like the leader of the administration was unaware of all the public uproar, okay, or unaware of the perception of mishandling or something is not right here. I believe the leader of administration, especially being the, national security, especially being in charge of national security, could have said, okay, could have intervened and could have said, well, look, is everything all right over here? Could have actually spoken to his Attorney General and advised his Attorney General to actually, hey, what's happening here? Is there anything we can do to assist, to ensure that legal procedures are being properly followed? So it seems like there's a failure and a breach, not just at the DPP's level. But because of the advisory capacity of the Attorney General, there may have been a lapse and in some respects a bit of dereliction of duty, both by the Attorney General and the Minister of National Security, which is, of course, the current leader of the administration. I think any reasonable person looking at this would come to the same conclusion. You must understand that in systems, there's a lot of check and balances. But the check and balances only work, okay, if standard operating procedures are followed, if precedence is followed, okay, if good judgment comes to bear in situations like these. So this doesn't just squarely. So these lapses in judgment and procedural errors seemingly does not just lie squarely at the feet of the DPP. Of course, he has major responsibility. But if the entire system worked in consonance, then a lot of this could have been avoided. And there's a lot of pressure now on the coroners to act in this particular case. And I hope in some respects that the public pressure, okay, and the publicity associated with these two cases do not put additional pressures that could possibly taint, that could possibly confuse the judgment of the coroners. But the question still remains. What? Because I think it's critical to do an exact study as to why the system failed these two gentlemen. I think it is imperative at this stage to do some sort of study, okay? And to ask why the system failed these two gentlemen and their families. Why did it take so long, so much public pressure for the quote-unquote, I believe, right thing to be done? Something that should have been done from the inception. And again, it's something that is customary practice. This is not surprising, especially based on what I've heard. These people are experienced people in having dealt with situations like this before. But what to me is troubling is that this administration and the people that consist the upper echelon of this administration always touts themselves and even have the hitters, the social media hitters, tout them as young and bright. Okay, you always hear the hitters say, oh, the administration is young, it's full of young and bright people. And then you see some confusing acts, okay, that actually prove the contrary. I mean, we've seen, so many civil cases brought against this current administration, and they totally lost on several of them. So the Grenadian taxpayers are left on the hook for repaying, okay, the outcome of these civil cases. And I would not be surprised if the families of these two deceased gentlemen would bring some sort of civil case against the state, okay, for having acted improperly or having mishandled these cases from the inception. Again, it is quite possible that the state would be on the hook for some sort of civil judgment in these cases, okay? And the Grenadian taxpayers will have to bear the burden of those costs, okay? So for administration that touts itself as composing young and bright individuals, I believe that the actions, okay, and the decision made and the mishandling of so many situations shows that they're anything but what they're touted to be. I mean, even in a public space, the leader of the administration is always quick to proclaim, I'm a lawyer, okay? As to say, I'm well prepared in legal matters to handle any situation. As to say, I'm well prepared in legal matters to handle any situation. But again, when those situations present themselves, look what happens. The government ends up spending major resources in the proceedings of these cases and ultimately ends up losing these cases. Okay? So I don't know. Is it a reflection of the legal advice the government gets? I mean, again, the leader of the administration is also a lawyer himself. So you would have thought in the legal domain and in the handling of legal cases that this administration would be armed, so to speak, to the teeth and would be able to adequately handle cases brought against it. So I hope all that I have said continues to add more clarity on this situation. And as I have said, I would continue my protest of sorts, okay, by not making too many videos other than those related to Mr. FRANKLYN and Mr. Frederick's cases, okay? In diesem Sinne, guten Abend.